my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm going to cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. This episode is in partnership with Motif Medical. Motif designs insurance-eligible products for busy moms. With a focus on innovation and empowerment, Motif's line of breast pumps and maternity compression garments are sophisticated yet discreet and made to support mothers as they navigate new motherhood. Discover why moms are reporting more milk in less time with the Luna breast pump and see how you can get it covered through insurance at motifmedical.com/birthhour. You'll also see their other products there like the Aura Glow, which is their new wearable pump that I discussed at the end of this episode with lactation consultant Jackie. We talk about what makes this wearable unique and how it compares to the Luna, and it's really just a great conversation, so be sure to listen to that at the end of this episode. Before we get to today's birth story, I want to talk a little bit about our online childbirth course. It's called Know Your Options, and this is the course you've been looking for if you just have that gut feeling that you know you should be taking a childbirth course, but maybe the one that's being offered to you by your care provider is not exactly what you're looking for. It might be more catered towards the type of birth they want you to have versus making you informed of all your different options and how to address different things that happen in birth, because as this podcast has shown us, birth is very unpredictable. So we would love to have you check out our 12-module course. You can go to thebirthhour.com/course to see detailed outlines of what is included in the course. You will also get a bonus course called Beyond the First Latch that is an additional 6 modules all about pumping, feeding your baby, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan. And we have a special coupon code for you. It's 100OFF for $100 off enrollment. Again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. Another great way to support the Birth Hour and get more involved in the community is to join our Patreon. You can do this by going to patreon.com/birthhour, and you pledge $5 or more a month, and you get perks like access to our archived episodes. We have over 800 episodes in the archives now that are not available in the main podcast feed. You also get access to our private Facebook group, which is a great place to find support and community, as well as searching the archives there. There's been so many great discussions, and you can just pop a question into the search bar and you'll find some great answers to things that have already been asked. The last thing that we offer to our Patreon members is monthly Zoom calls, which is a really great, intimate way to connect with other Birth Hour listeners and me each month. Your support means so much to me. There's a few different ways to do it. You can do a gift membership, send that link to someone who needs a gift idea for you, or you can do an annual membership, which basically gets you like 2 months free. This support means so much to me and really, truly keeps the lights on here at the Birth Hour, because with more podcast networks emerging, it's becoming a little more challenging as an independent podcaster to keep things going. So our Patreon supporters are a huge part of that, and I'm really grateful to each and every one of you. So again, you can go to patreon.com/birthhour to get started with that. Today's birth story guest is Jane, and she has 2 stories to share with us, both hospital births, but she prepared for them very differently. And she talks about how her experiences with both the births and postpartum were different and led to a different career choice for her. All right, let's hear from Jane. Hi, Jane. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Bryn. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'm excited to hear your birth stories. But before we get to that, can you tell listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Yeah, for sure. So excited to be here. I love this podcast, and it's been just so helpful to me and so many of my friends and people that I know. So I'm just really grateful to be here. So thank you. Yeah, so I'm Jane Bacher. I live in New York. Actually, I was living in New York City for about 20 years with my family, my husband, and my 2 kids who are now 10 and 6. And we just recently moved to the suburbs of New York City up to Connecticut. So I still am not sure where to say I'm from. It's a little, a little tricky. But yeah, so living here up in Connecticut with my family now, and working as the founder of a postpartum wellness company called Anya.
Very cool. All right. Well, let's start with your first pregnancy and birth and anything you want to share there.
Yeah. So as I said before, my kids are 10 and 6 now. So it was actually pretty fun going down memory lane to kind of think back to my daughter. My daughter's my 10-year-old and my son is 6. So my daughter's name is London. And so when I became pregnant with London, it was an unexpected pregnancy, which, I'm so grateful. But at the time, it was a bit of a surprise. I was kind of newly married in my 20s, living in New York City, working in the fashion industry with a bunch of other, 20-somethings, and none of my friends or colleagues had kids. So I was kind of like the first of everybody that I knew to get pregnant. And I wanted to share 2 birth stories today because they were, both in New York City hospital births, but couldn't have been more different. And so with my first, I think just being young and being that I didn't have a lot of friends kind of who'd gone through it before me, I was, like so many first-time moms, totally unprepared for kind of the whole thing. My pregnancy was relatively positive, normal, if there is even a normal. I would say I was pretty fortunate. I think had pretty typical symptoms and kind of experience there. But the most notable thing when I was thinking back is that I just basically did everything possible to pretend that nothing was changing in my life. I powered through. I kept working. I was traveling a lot for work. I was running around New York City. I was just kind of nothing is changing. I can't let anybody know that, my life is going to change because I didn't really think that it was. And most of my pregnancy and kind of preparing for baby was designing my nursery and shopping for baby clothes and obsessing over my registry and, reading a lot of books about bringing baby home and sleep and eating and all of that. So I would say that I spent a lot of time preparing, but I don't think I was really focused on the right things.
Okay.
So towards the end of my pregnancy, I went into labor in the office. I remember kind of telling my colleagues okay, guys, I'm going to go have this baby and then I'll be right back kind of a thing. It was that was the mentality. And it was kind of funny because with my first, I raced home, I showered really quickly. We packed up the bag, took a picture with the doorman and then raced to the hospital. And I think just even listening to that, you could probably tell that I was nowhere near ready to go to the hospital. I was
stressing me out a little bit.
I know. Totally. So I got to the hospital and kind of was checked into triage and they were you're barely a centimeter dilated. We gave 2 options. You can stay here and we'll give you Pitocin and progress your labor because you're not quite ready for that yet, or you can go home. And, I said, well, if I don't need to, if you don't need to progress the labor, then I don't want to. So I opted to leave, but it was the middle of a snowstorm in February and I was pretty far away from my apartment. So my husband and I left and we were kind of well, what do we do now? I clearly was not having very serious contractions because I was just kind of bopping around. So we ended up actually going to my parents who live in the city as well. We went to their apartment building because they lived nearer to the hospital. And the recommendation from my OB was to go and walk stairs. And I'm thinking I live in New York City. Nobody has stairs, no, we don't have a house. So I ended up walking stairs in the freight stairwell of my parents' apartment building. And my husband did it with me alongside me. And we walked flights of stairs for a long time just to try to help progress things. It was strange. So finally kind of got through some more contractions there at my parents' apartment and, checking in with my OB and finally went back to the hospital when I was a bit closer and more ready. And the rest of that was kind of a blur. I would say I had a relatively, pain-free kind of blissful birth. I got my epidural right away. And then I just sort of fell asleep and dozed off. And then I sort of woke up and it was time to push and I pushed and had my daughter. So it was kind of wild in the sense of it was a pain-free medicated birth. What was not pain-free was postpartum. Postpartum was really hard. And starting immediately with I think due to just kind of my epidural and catheter, once they removed the catheter, I was unable to pee for a long time. And I was in so much pain. Then they had to put the catheter back in because I wasn't able to use those muscles.
Yeah.
I don't exactly even understand what was going on, but at the time I didn't know. But I just knew it was so painful. And breastfeeding was really challenging in the beginning. I had a poor latch that I didn't know. I think maybe there was a lactation consultant in the hospital with me, but I either said, oh, I've got it. She latched on, so I think I'm fine. And for a couple of weeks had a really poor latch, and my nipples were I remember my daughter, like when she would cry because she was hungry, I would cry. Just the anticipation, like just knowing this little piranha was coming for me to that she needed to nurse. It just brought me to tears. So that was really hard. I had a pelvic prolapse, and that was also something I didn't really know that I did. And I for months, I was just like, what is this? I'm trying to do my own research. Definitely felt a little embarrassed and wasn't sure to talk about it, and then just like kind of more broadly, the shock of postpartum didn't end after those first few weeks. So the next year or two was just a series of, wow, what is going on? Everything changed. I ended up leaving my prior job without a real plan what to do next because I just wasn't sure how to do it all. And fortunately, I was able to, take that little bit of a pause, but I was just like, I know I can't go back to that job because it was like a 24/7 kind of thing. I loved being home with my daughter, and I wasn't sure. I was like, if I'm going to, not be with her all day, then I think I need to really be passionate about what I'm leaving her to go do. And I sort of knew like, well, I don't think that this is it. But, and also just like months 6 to 12 when my hair's falling out and I'm exhausted and I'm like, I think I'm supposed to be back because every message that I'm seeing from society right now is telling me I'm supposed to be back on my feet. We unfortunately live in a society where it's like that bounce back mentality. And so I'm like looking at other people and I should have lost the baby weight and I should be feeling good and I should be, back to my former self. And I just wasn't. And so it was really the next few years. I think one, it was not just my birth, but the whole kind of experience with my first and the lack of preparedness that led me to make some big shifts. And over the next few years, kind of dive into the health and wellness industry, into the postpartum space, both personally and professionally, and really kind of obsessing over researching how to support my mind and body through this change and to understand it and to know what was normal and what wasn't. So it was a long road, but that was really the next few years from me, in which kind of led me to approaching. It was 3 years later when I was finally ready to say, okay, we always knew we wanted to have another child, but it took 3 years for me to be like, okay with the thought of doing that again.
Interesting. Okay. So what got you to that point?
Yeah. So I think it was a lot of work, a lot of that work over those couple of years. And one of the big, kind of things that changed for me and actually inspired me to create my company was my sister-in-law, who she kind of had a child in between my two. So this was like after I had my daughter, and she grew up in China, and she was kind of preparing for her pregnancy and her postpartum. And watching her and what she was focusing on was so mind-blowing to me. She basically said to me, like, I'm not really focused on my pregnancy. Like, I have my doctor visits and I know they'll take care of me. I am solely focused on postpartum and planning and preparing. And not just like for taking care of her baby, but for this transition for me, making sure that I have adequate time to kind of rest and heal, making sure that I have a plan for nourishment, that I have specific foods that I want to, introduce week to week, month to month to support all of these changes going on in my body. There were different specific kind of rituals and things that she was incorporating. And this was my first introduction to any other way of kind of supporting moms through postpartum. And it led me to research like, okay, this is so fascinating. Is this just Chinese medicine, or are some of these things that she's doing more broadly practiced? And finding that almost every other part of the world has a very specific protocol or kind of practice surrounding postpartum recovery. And that it's this, kind of sacred period of time carved out in a woman's life. Everybody around her in her life knows it's very important. She grows up knowing it's very important. And this time is to be protected. And this is about her healing and recovery and nourishment, almost like we would treat healing from like a major surgery if you're in the hospital. And so this was just one of the things, in addition to just kind of me navigating through the couple of years after my daughter was born, that really led me to want to do that, to want to approach this differently. Like I felt like with my first, I sort of just, and I think you can't know because you just can't prepare for this stuff. But I just sort of like allowed everyone around me, mostly like the medical professionals, to sort of tell me what to do, right? But it left me feeling, and not everybody feels like this, but for me, I'm somebody who I felt like up till that point, I'd always been very passionate about my personal health and wellness, and felt like I always knew kind of what to do. If I was not feeling well, I knew what to do, right? Like I kind of knew how to take care of myself. And whether it was like came down with a cold or whether it was just a low energy, I sort of like knew the things. And I felt like there was no information about how to support my body and my health through pregnancy, birth, and postpartum that I had kind of encountered to that point in my circle. And so with my son, 3 years later, I did a lot of things differently. We became pregnant. I was really fortunate that once we kind of decided we wanted to, then it was a pretty short, road getting there. It happened pretty quickly. And at the time I was working as a Pilates instructor and a nutritional consultant. So I think throughout my whole pregnancy, that was like just a kind of a gift that I happened to be doing that in that moment in time, because there was so much movement already incorporated into my pregnancy. I was always on my feet. I was so aware, and not only teaching, but like just kind of very aware of the changes that were going on in my body and supporting that through pelvic floor exercises, through a lot of exercise and movement. And throughout my pregnancy, I had a few goals. One, I did plan to deliver in a hospital again. I mean, for those of us who live in New York City, unfortunately, there's not a lot of other options. It's like, aside from a home birth. And so I knew I wanted to deliver in a hospital, but I was very focused on just having more control this time. And that sounds a little crazy because at the same time, you cannot control the way a labor and delivery goes. And I knew that, but I wanted to do what I could and then kind of leave the rest right up to, okay, this could go one of two ways, but at least I know that like I did everything I could to sort of support myself and my goals. So I knew that I wanted as few interventions as possible. I wanted a non-medicated birth. So I found an OB that supported me in that. I asked around and talked with a lot of people, and that was a big, really important thing that I kind of went into those conversations so differently than my first time around. Like I had thoughts, I had opinions, I had questions for her. I wanted to understand like, well, why is this done? And what's the risk here? And to me, that's just like, it was so empowering feeling like I was able to take part in that, and that it wasn't just this like a one-sided kind of thing where I was listening and being told. I was like, no, let's talk about that. Help me understand, why you would do this thing over that. I did a lot of preparation. I found this amazing woman who is a Pilates instructor, but also a kind of a birth coach, I guess. And she helped me with, once I was in my second trimester, I started working with her a little bit one-on-one and really doing a lot of work on kind of strengthening and releasing my pelvic floor, especially once my son started getting bigger and I was feeling that heaviness. And just like after having worked through, my pelvic prolapse from my first, that's another thing I didn't drill into, but something that I think was really important information for me to understand. And I had no idea at the time was, here's my two plugs. No matter what type of delivery you have, I believe every new mom should see a pelvic floor physical therapist if it's possible. But with my prolapse, I was told that the only solution was surgery at first. And then I ended up working with this woman, this coach, who helped me understand that because of the hormone changes postpartum, as long as you are, your estrogen kind of drops, like plummets immediately after birth and stays low until you stop breastfeeding. And if you aren't breastfeeding, it'll regulate a little bit sooner. But basically, as long as you're breastfeeding, your estrogen levels stay very low. And that sort of prevents you from being able to build muscle easily. And so this was something like in terms of my prolapse, she basically told me, no, we can work on this together. You don't need to get surgery, but it's going to be hard to build that strength back up as long as you're breastfeeding. And so that was just a really interesting and very important thing for me because I didn't want to have surgery and I didn't believe it was severe enough that I needed to. Mm-hmm. And so we were actually able to work through that together. And so with my second, that was a big focus was like, let's practice pushing. Help me understand what muscles I'm using. And that was part of the work that we did together. And then the other thing I did was, I considered getting a birth doula. I thought that I probably wanted somebody. I met a few because I think it's a personal relationship. You just have to meet people to figure out like, is this who I want in the room with me or helping me through this? And I ended up actually basically like training my husband. And he was awesome.
Nice.
So I got to tell you, it was unexpected because he's not really that type of person, but he... there's nobody that would have supported me better or more, right? Like he knew what I needed and he was totally game for kind of like learning how he could help. And so after meeting a few different doulas, I just felt like I don't know if this is who I want in the room with me. And so I talked to him about it and we read some books together and I showed him some exercises. I have a cousin who's also a birth doula and she sent me some ideas for like how to bring him in and kind of, teach him. And so I think there's so many aspects of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum where as a woman, you're kind of alone in it. And it's hard to figure out. I hear this a lot and I feel this. I think it's hard to ask your partner for what you need or to bring them in because you're just kind of going through it yourself and learning as you go. And then they don't know what to do. And it just creates this kind of space between you, right? And they don't exactly know how to help. So I do feel like asking him to do this, one, it was like a tangible ask. And it was like, I need you. And, they love to step up when you need, he's like, okay, like I've got you, I've got this. He was all in on it. And it definitely helped just bring him into like, especially later in my third trimester and going into the birth, like what I was going through, what I was feeling, what I needed. So that was a really important connection, I think, for us to have. And so with my son, I guess those were some of the things that I did to prepare. And I guess I would say lastly, I was very focused on preparing for postpartum, as I've kind of shared. Also, I hired a night nurse before I had my son. And, obviously that was a complete luxury to be able to do that. But I was at the point where I was like kind of just getting my business off the ground and it was something we were able to do. And I had somebody coming for a couple of weeks in those first couple of weeks. And she was equally like, she was helping us to get some sleep, but she also supported me in terms of like cooking, cleaning, and some of those kind of like postpartum doula activities. So she was a little bit of a hybrid there. Oh, the other thing I'll share is just in my goal to kind of having a low intervention, it was kind of interesting because I wouldn't say like my friends were really, I don't think any of my close friends have the similar goal. In fact, none of them have so far. And I wouldn't say that they were like very supportive. It was more of like, why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
And so what was really helpful for me was I kind of had to look outside of that group. And they, I wouldn't say, it's not that they were not supportive, but they were just kind of like, yeah, why?
Yeah.
It was one conversation that I had with a friend of a friend. She basically was like, you need to talk to my friend who has delivered all of her babies without medication and is very passionate about this and very knowledgeable, and you should just talk to her. And we went and got breakfast. And it was that conversation that like gave me the confidence. And she kind of said the same thing to me, that for her, she just needed one person to say like, if you want this, do it, try it. You can do it. You're capable. Just that positivity and that kind of like yeah, like go for it. Like you can do it. And I'll never forget that because it wasn't even a good friend of mine. And she was, like I said, a friend of a friend, but it was really important to have somebody kind of in my corner. And then of course my husband too, once I got him on board. At first he was like, why? Right. But once I got him on board, but I think you need, whatever your goals are, having that like kind of positive force was really helpful for me and very important for me.
Yeah, I feel like when people are like, why would you want to do that? Like they're not trying to be like hurtful, but the way that comes out, it is kind of like you feel like you're being judged, but it's probably more about them. And like when people choose something different from what you chose for yourself, you get a little like questioning, maybe defensive. And I definitely experienced that with my birth choices too.
Yeah, it's exactly like you said. And I wasn't offended and I got it at the time. And I sort of just like looked elsewhere because I was like,
because it's tricky to explain why without then like kind of coming off as judging their choices.
Exactly. Yes, 100%. And that's why like I still struggle. And even coming into this conversation today, like my friends ask me all the time, would you do it again? 100% I would. Yeah. And I loved my experience, but it was really about me. Like it was something that I really wanted. And I was in a place in my life where like, it was about me and my body. And it was something that I think I needed probably coming out of my first experience. There were things I needed to correct and change. And I think that there was like this, I want to test my body to try to do this. And again, I was very open to like things happen. And I know that.
Right. Of course.
I'm ready for that. But I just felt like I wanted to give it my best shot. And it felt very empowering to me in the moment. But like you said, it's hard to explain that to people without sounding judgmental yourself. So thank you for saying that. Yeah. So with my son, I was, full term, but I was like at my daughter's kind of gymnastics. I mean, she was 3. So her gymnastics competition, if you can even call it that, when my water broke with my second. And that did not happen with my first. They actually broke my water in the hospital with my first. And so we're standing at this like huge Chelsea Piers in New York City. It's like you're really far away from your car. Like we were standing watching. And suddenly I feel like it felt like I peed my pants. I mean, it wasn't like this gush, but it was a lot of fluid. We were actually just walking back to our car, which was weird that we had driven in the first place, but we did. And I said to my husband, I was like, I think my water just broke. And he's like, what? But I said to him, I said, okay, for me, I wasn't having any contractions. There were no other signs of labor besides this water breaking. And so I'm like, I'd done a lot of research and I was like, okay, I have time, but kind of like clock's ticking. So I said, okay, like I'm going to go home. You go to work. I definitely have a few hours. I want to go home and kind of do my thing for a few hours and I'll keep in touch. I'll call my OB. He's like, just promise me you'll call our OB at least. I said, of course, I'll call her. So I sent him to work, which he thought was super weird. And I'm like, trust me, we have time. So I went home, I showered, and I basically spent the next few hours like kind of doing like exercises. The hardest part was when your water breaks, it is like, I think this is another thing people who listen to your podcast know, but a lot of people don't know that it's not just like this one gush and then you're done. It is this like a hose is just running. I mean, it's like this steady.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. Like, how is there more stuff coming out?
How is there more stuff coming out? Where is it coming from? And then you start feeling a little panicky because is there any left like surrounding the baby, right? Yeah. Because it is a lot of fluid. And your body just keeps making more. And so it's just like that was the hardest part was like catching all of the fluid.
Right. Especially being like out of your house. I don't know how you would even manage that.
It was kind of wild. So I'm doing that. And then I'm texting with this woman I mentioned before, my kind of birth coach / Pilates instructor, asking her, okay, what else can I do? Like it's game time, right? And I think because it was my second, and I think I can say this here, one of the really interesting things that she suggested was at that point, I think because my water had broken like sex is not really a good idea, but masturbation can help. So that was just kind of a funny one where you got to get things like moving, right? You got to get the things stimulated.
Yeah.
So basically just like tried whatever I could at home, and the labor did progress pretty well from there. So like contractions started. I was feeling a little panicked though, because I didn't want to go to the hospital too early because my water had broken. I knew that like once I got there, they would check me in. And I knew that like once I get checked into the hospital, then the clock really does start running and you only have so much time before they're going to really push intervention. So keeping in touch with my OB, I basically was just like, can I stay home? She said, yes. She did say, she's like, can you just get a little closer to the hospital? I was living downtown. My hospital was uptown. So again, I went to my parents' apartment. This time I had my medicine ball. I had my things, had my husband meet me there. And by the time I got up there, my contractions were starting to get pretty strong. I have some photos. My mom was there. My husband was there. He was helping me through them, kind of like standing behind me, applying pressure to my hips, that kind of thing. And then I'd kind of work through the contractions on the ball. And then finally, when it was like kind of unbearable, I said, okay, it's time to go to the hospital. I'll never forget that cab ride. It was a short ride. It's like 12 blocks, but longest cab ride of my life. I was like, the contractions were really intense. The poor cab driver
I was going to ask.
He definitely was really afraid I was going to deliver a baby in his cab. He was so nervous. But we made it. But I was ready to go. When we checked in, I think they got me into a room quickly. I was 7 centimeters dilated. Back to just like what my goals were. I felt like I went in like armed for battle a little bit. I was like, do not put me on a bed. I need to move. I need to be on my feet. I need to be on my hands and knees. I did not want to be strapped to a bed on my back. That was just what I did not want. And even like with the IV, this is probably not great, but I was happy. They insisted on giving me an IV. And I'm like, I've been drinking. I actually even packed a labor tonic with me, and my OB sort of looked the other way. In a hospital, you're like not allowed to have any food or drinks, which is absurd. Like I basically tried to do everything I could, as if it was a birth not in a hospital, but in a hospital. So I had some snacks. I had my drink. I said, I'm hydrated. I've been drinking all day. I was like, it's okay. They insisted on the IV. They actually couldn't get the needle in. Oh my God, they bruised my arms. And finally, I was in such deep labor. I was like, they gave up. And I actually did not even get an IV, but at least like I knew I had to ask for like the IV drip on the stand so I could walk around with it, right? Honestly, like I think it was less than 2 hours, maybe an hour from when like I was all checked in and in triage to when I delivered my daughter. And I probably pushed like 8 times or something. And it's so wild how your body just you sort of forget. I don't know. It's like thinking back, I'm like, what did it feel like? It was the craziest pain I've ever felt, but also like, I think when I was doing all of these preparations, I was reading a lot about like orgasmic births. And
right.
I think I really thought that could be me. I was in such a like zen state.
I mean, we've had a couple of those episodes, but I'm like you. I did not come anywhere close to that.
I'm so envious of those women because I really like, I thought that might, but I knew once I was like kind of deep in my labor and going through those contractions, I knew that wasn't going to be me. To be honest, I think the hardest part was like, not that last hour, but like the 3 hours before it, maybe.
The transition.
Because you're still far away.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid I'm not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely, even once I got to the hospital, and my husband was amazing, the most helpful thing he did was standing behind me and compressing my hips through the contractions a little bit, just like helping to support that and helping to like kind of move my hips around. And I definitely looked at him at one point and said, okay, I need it. I need the epidural. And he looked me in the eyes and he was like, no, you've got this. We are so close. You can do this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cried just even thinking about it because it was such a powerful moment. And like, I can't even imagine how hard it must have been for him to watch me go through that.
Yeah.
And to be able to say like, no, you wanted this and you're almost there. And I know you can do it. I believe in you. And I did. And that like kept me going. I would definitely have just given up. Because again, it's not like the stakes weren't so high. It was just like he knew I wanted it and we did. And so the coolest part was, there were two coolest moments. One was somebody asked me, like, did you feel the ring of fire? Definitely. But it all kind of felt, like those last few contractions where you're pushing it. I mean, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. It's a crazy kind of like primal pain. But the other thing that was challenging is like, in those last few contractions, they kind of come like in and out a little, right? Like they're sort of crowning, but then they come back in and then the contraction pushes them out. It's like, when is this going to be done? But the last one, he sort of came out through his shoulders, and my doctor encouraged me. She said, grab him, pull him out. And so I did. And I reached down and I pulled him the rest of the way out and pulled him onto my chest. And that was really cool.
Yeah.
And actually my mom was filming the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
So she came into the room. Poor thing, I've scarred her for life. She is not the type to like want to do these things, but she did it. And she stood there with the video and held it, The other coolest moment was that I like walked to the recovery room. So for me, it was like, that was like the most important thing, because like I said, like my first birth was blissful, truly. The epidural worked and I didn't feel a thing.
Right.
But after was so scary because I felt like my body didn't work. Like I was broken and I didn't know what was happening. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't feel certain parts. I couldn't pee, right? I couldn't do these things. And so with my son, after like they kind of cleaned me up, they were getting the wheelchair and I said like, can I walk? And they're like, well, if you want to. So I said, yeah, I want to. And so in my mind, I was like a gladiator, like walking through like a stadium. I don't know. I was like this powerful, I felt like a goddess. I don't even know what, but I felt like I was walking down the halls of the hospital. I was like powerful and strong. And the funniest part is my husband videotaped it, and the video is so different than what was in my head. Like,
oh man,
I'm basically like shuffling
I was going to say waddling a little bit,
shuffling, dragging my IV, stand with me. Like it was pretty hilarious, but the back of my gown gaping open, like who knows? It was pretty hilarious. But that moment for me was really, because I think again, this is like so personal to me, but I was just like, I did it. And it just felt like the way it was supposed to feel for me.
Yeah.
And I would say like from then on, like I know that, second time is always different than first, but my recovery was so wildly different, meaning like the very acute physical recovery, like vaginal recovery, that was like night and day. After a couple of days, I wasn't in so much pain. I was able to like have bowel movements. I was able to like walk around. Of course, nursing was much easier the second time around. One, your body knows what to do and in a different way. And two, I kind of knew, but it wasn't all bliss. Of course, postpartum is hard no matter what. But I will say, like, I got the experience that I wanted in terms of I really approached it. And I was like starting a business, but I still like, I basically looked at that time as like, this is like a gift that I'll never get again. Like this kind of ability to take a time out from life and just sort of pause everything. And I have this excuse to like not respond to texts and not invite people over and not have to do all the things that the pressures I put on myself to do all the time. Like this is a timeout. Yeah. And my only job is to take care of my baby and myself. And of course, like our broader family, but like, not really. That wasn't my job in that moment. Like my husband, my partner, my parents, my sister, I had this night nurse. Like I was so lucky to have a really good support system, and I used them, I used them a lot, and my best friends too. Like I was able to better just like ask for what I needed, tell them what I needed, talk to them about what I was going through, like invite them over and not feel like I had to clean up. In fact, ask them to do some things. Like I had no shame. And it was amazing. Like, I don't know, we put so many pressures on ourselves to like do so much. And then there's not enough reminders from society that tell us no, you don't have to do those things in this period. This is about recovery. Like treat it like you just underwent surgery and need to support, your body through that. So that's what I did. I'm such a believer, and it really changed my experience. I look back on that, my postpartum experience with my son Hudson, and it was like, I feel like joy.
Yeah.
It was pretty amazing, actually.
I love that. So many great words of wisdom in that of just, you have every right to turn down all the things and just take care of you and baby, and that's it. So,
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, what about, I feel like you've done a really good job of mentioning resources throughout your whole episode, but what resources do you want to highlight at the end here?
Yeah, well, one of the books I think I mentioned real quickly, The First 40 Days.
Yes.
A lot of inspiration for my own business, but also just like, it was very helpful for me. And a lot of the recipes are like, they're probably more complicated than most. But one, I think it's such a helpful resource and kind of a mindset shift.
Yeah. It's a really beautiful book too.
It's a beautiful book. Exactly. So I love that one. And I actually used a lot of recipes from that book.
Nice.
And then of course, like, I mentioned my company, Anya, and this isn't like it's not a plug. It's just a very natural, like literally this is why that's why I started this company. And so I wanted mothers, families to feel like they had a resource that was kind of like the what to expect postpartum. Because I really felt like all the books and blogs and apps and stuff sort of just like, it might be like half of a chapter at the end of the book, really leave that section out.
Yeah.
And I also felt like, so then what you end up doing is finding like a lot of opinions. And then you're thrust into like, we've touched on this a little bit, but like all the judgments of new motherhood and like what's right and wrong and what should I be doing and what shouldn't I? And I really wanted like a credible, non-judgmental, kind of like a 360 look at like all these things that, a woman's body's going through and that we experience. So everything from like relationships postpartum to, the breastfeeding timeline, what exactly happens and what should you expect? I think there's so many unrealistic expectations out there, right?
Yeah.
Or kind of a timeline of like what's going on in my body, weeks 1 to 2, months 1 through 3, like what are those changes and what might I be feeling as a result, right? Of those hormonal shifts, of that physical recovery and how to support myself through it. So we created this kind of guide. It's called the Postpartum Post on our website. And that's really just all information and it's all coming from experts. So we interviewed over like 75 different women's health professionals. So everything from like OBs to midwives, lactation consultants, doulas, pelvic floor physical therapists, urologists, like you name it. And so I hope that is a resource that women can go to. And we also share a lot of education like on our Instagram. So that's on the informational side. And then products to support moms through postpartum recovery and breastfeeding and postpartum hair loss and all that. So yeah, again, I just wanted to create a resource that I didn't have and that women can kind of trust and can help them through it.
Yeah. I love when I feel like we hear this like pretty regularly on the podcast when, people's own experiences and births and postpartums kind of launch a new career or a business idea and they become really passionate about it. So it's very cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think that's the best. It's especially for women and especially in maternal health. Like there's so much that's not tapped yet, and it's like, It's just more of us going through this stuff and kind of saying like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Half the population.
Right. Let's care about this a little bit more.
Let's care about this a little bit more. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So then as far as people connecting with you about your story and Anya, where's the best place for that?
Yeah, so you can find us. I also am very present on our Instagram and always in the DMs. So like always find us there. So it's at thisis.anya on Instagram. And like I said, we are a brand and we sell products, but I'd say our Instagram in particular is like 80% educational content. So that's really what we want it to be. And our website is thisisanya.com. And then for anybody who is, expecting and preparing for postpartum or you're in it. And even if you're 6 months out, like we have products for you. So we wanted to just share 20% off for any listeners, code ANYAPOD20. So please feel free to use that if you want to try anything out.
All right. Very cool. And then you'll send me like a direct link for that guide you mentioned as well.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jane, for sharing today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Now I'm going to talk with Jackie from Motif Medical about their awesome wearable pump. Hi, Jackie. Thank you so much for joining me to chat about the Motif breast pump line.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited. We have some exciting things coming.
Awesome. Well, before we get into all of that, will you tell listeners just a little bit about you and what you do at Motif Medical?
Yes, so I am a registered nurse and board certified lactation consultant, and I have the pleasure of being the clinical lactation advisor or clinical lactation specialist with Motif, which just means I get to play around with all the fun breast pumps and tell them all the things that might make the pumps and the products better for breastfeeding families, and I absolutely love it. I also work in private practice, so I still and very much, boots on the ground, helping families in their own homes right after birth or anytime in the postpartum period and the prenatal period, just helping families be more prepared for a breastfeeding journey and all the things that they might encounter.
Very cool. Well, I was lucky enough to get to use the Luna breast pump when it was pretty new. I guess 6 years ago now. My youngest just turned 6. And I talk about all the time how it was my favorite pump of all the ones I had tried over 3 kids and everything. And then you guys came out with the hands-free pump a couple years ago. And now there's something new on the horizon. So I want to talk about the new pump that's coming out this year.
Yes, we are very excited. Just after the first of the year, we are launching the Aura Glow, which is a new wearable pump. You might remember the Aura as our original wearable pump, and it's still available, but we've got a new player on deck that I think is going to provide a lot of really sought after features, a lot of great pump quality, and something that moms I think are going to be really excited to use on a pretty regular basis as they're going back to work or just going about their lives where they need to be hands-free, need to have that wearable pump option.
Very cool. So I know you guys kind of take a lot of, I don't know, advice isn't the right word, but you take feedback. There we go. You take feedback from customers and what people are liking about pumps and things like that. So what are some of the differences with the Aura Glow that we can expect to see?
Yes, I love this question because this is why I love working with Motif, that
Yeah.
they are so particular about taking feedback from the professional community, from the families who are using their products, and they're not just looking to pump out products that, sell. Obviously, it's a business. We need to sell things to stay in business, but the idea is to make products that actually meet needs and make pumping easier for people so that they naturally just want to buy the products, which I love that idea. And I love that we've built the Aura Glow based on feedback. So the thing I'm most excited about is the expanded flange sizing. So you get 5 flange sizes right in the box. So you get the 24 millimeter breast shield, but we also include 15 millimeter, 17 millimeter, 19 millimeter, and 21 millimeter inserts so that right out of the box, most people are going to be able to find something that allows them to pump efficiently, effectively, and comfortably. And then if those sizes don't work, the 15 through 24 that come in the box don't work, we also have even smaller sizes, 11, 12, 13, and 14 millimeter inserts available, and then a 27 millimeter breast shield available for those that might need a larger size. So excited about that. The other things that I think set this pump apart, it's a powerful wearable. So the suction is 260 to 280 mmHg. So that's millimeters of mercury. That's how we measure that suction pressure. And that puts it on par with the suction of pumps like Luna. It's still a wearable, still something that we're going to classify as a secondary pump that we would use to complement the Luna, but it's powerful. And it has 2 pre-programmed pumping modes, which are just, I think, something that's going to make life so much easier and take a lot of the guesswork out of what settings do I use? How do I set my pump to get the most out of it?
Yeah, the different sizing is huge. I know I tried a wearable pump with my last baby, and it was, it was very early on in the making of these, but it just that did not work for me and was not
Mhm.
comfortable. So having those different sizes is amazing. And do you guys provide some kind of guidance in, the packaging, or can people reach out to help find the right size?
We do provide guidance in the packaging that's all been updated to
Mm.
match the most current information we have about flange sizing. So, as I said, Motif is huge on listening to that feedback, and lactation consultants have been screaming about flange sizing for a while now. And Motif definitely has listened by including those smaller sizes and that flange sizing guidance that does fit the most current information that we have about getting the right size.
Amazing. So you also mentioned the programming modes for pumping. Can you explain a little bit about those and what's different with the Aura Glow?
Yes, so I think this is revolutionary. I love this idea. There are two pre programmed pumping sessions. There is the cluster feeding mode and the general pumping mode. And you can still use the pump, just as you normally would use a breast pump. But the cluster feeding mode has these 5 levels of pumping and then pause, pumping and pause to mimic how a baby cluster feeds. So that can help increase milk supply. And
Mm.
without the need to do this like big long power pumping, hour long power pumping session. It's this 30-minute pre-programmed session that your pump will move through all by itself. And then the general pumping mode is just a way to maximize your pumping efforts a little bit by triggering a couple of letdowns. So it goes through massage mode and it stays there for 2 minutes to help trigger that letdown. Then it goes to expression mode and you get that, longer, more rhythmic, kind of mimicking how the baby suckles once your milk has let down. And then it will go back to the massage mode automatically to trigger that second letdown and then go back to expression. So it repeats the massage, expression without you even having to think about it. And that way you can get a little bit more out of the time you're spending pumping.
Yeah, that's amazing. I don't think I've heard of that before on a pump. And I'm just like sitting here, like picturing a nursing session with baby, and like they kind of fall asleep. And then they're like, oh, wait, I want some more. And they wake up, and then you have another letdown. And I could see that being something that you would really benefit from as far as milk supply with a pump that could do that as well.
Yes, exactly. Just trying to take advantage of all those hormone fluctuations and all the ways that our babies know exactly how to influence our milk supply. We're just trying to mimic that with the pump setting.
Awesome. Okay, so then you mentioned that, you do classify it as a secondary pump. What kind of guidance would you give people that are trying to decide, what pump is right for them, based on whether they're pumping full time or using it occasionally, or, lifestyle, things like that? Do you, especially in your work in private practice, I'm sure you see a lot of people wondering what they should get.
Oh, yes. I get this question a lot. And the truth is, when we do anything other than traditional flanges and that high quality double electric pump, like the Motif Luna, anything that doesn't have those traditional flanges and that powerful motor is really considered a secondary pump. Now, does that mean it's not going to work or it's not going to be effective? It's not going to have its place? Of course not. We know lots of people are using wearable and portable pumps, and many of them, are very successful at building and maintaining milk supply. But for most people, we want to rely on something that's a primary pump like the Luna to build and maintain a milk supply, and then use something like a wearable or portable pump. So a wearable like the Aura Glow as that secondary option that we're using when we just can't drag out the big pump and the traditional flanges. So I have 4 kids. I could very easily see myself needing a wearable pump to be able to keep up with my other children if I were to have another baby. And that would be a perfect scenario to use this pump, at those times when you just need to be hands free. Maybe you're traveling, maybe you're at work, lots of different scenarios. And what I tell people is, if you're in a situation where you can't pull out that primary pump, then this would be a perfect option. A wearable like the Aura Glow would be a perfect option to complement for those times when you can't pull out your primary pump. And I do have lots of patients who kind of incorporate them from the beginning when they first introduce pumping. We tend to get a better result then than if we only use one type of pump and then try to add another pump later. Sometimes it's about getting your body to be sort of conditioned to respond. So maybe adding in that wearable, if you know you're going to need it, adding it in when you first start introducing pumping into your journey.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I could see it being something that, keeps people nursing their baby just because they may not have pumped otherwise. Like you were saying, you get into a situation where you can't pull out that pump. So you just push off that pumping session, which I know I did with my second baby at work. And then my milk supply suffered. But maybe if I had had something like this, I would have been like, oh, let me just do this real quick while I finish this work or whatever. And I always tell people, block it on your calendar. Like, don't make exceptions. Don't miss a pumping session. But of course, things come up and it can be hard sometimes. So I love that there's just more options out there.
Yes, some milk removal is always better than no milk removal. So it's like if we can only pump with a wearable, then by golly, let's get that wearable out. That's exactly what we need to do in that scenario. So yeah I love that encouragement that it might make things actually make that breastfeeding journey go a little bit further with the help of the tools that we have now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I've loved everything that Motif has come out with. So I'm so excited for this new launch and to hear everyone's feedback from it. And I really appreciate you taking time to chat with me today about the new Aura Glow.
Yes, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.
Thanks again to Jane for sharing her story with us. And if you want to check out the resources she shared, you can always find the show notes page by going to thebirthhour.com and searching for her name in the search bar. We'll also have links on the website to our Know Your Options childbirth course, as well as the Patreon. And I try to link things in the podcast apps where you're listening to this episode, but each app is a little different. So sometimes those links work and sometimes they don't. But hopefully you can find everything you need on the website. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.